Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome everybody to the Aliyah Day, brand new week. Hope your weekend was great, and I pray that your week is going to be amazing. This is Parashat Vayeishev, Slika, and here in this parasha, this part of the Torah, from here until the end of the Torah, or the end of Breshit, the primary focus is on Yosef. And I find this really phenomenal if you think about it, because, the book of Breshit has, 49 chapters, okay? And here we are we're in chapter 37, actually 50 chapters. My apologies. I was just looking back here I said 49, it's actually 50. So 50 chapters. And here we are in chapter 37. And from this point forward, the primary focus of the book of Genesis is on Yosef. And so if you think that we've talked about the divine Messiah and the reality of that Yeshua is the Moshiach, if you think we've talked about that up until now, we haven't even started. Because the story of Yosef, in my opinion, is the absolute mic drop that Yeshua is the Messiah. Because the reality is that the Messiah has to fit the pattern of Yosef. It has to fit. One of the from time to time you hear these kind of anti-missionary ideas that go around. It's almost like they float out ideas because they think that they're going to be effective. And maybe they are to a certain extent because people are ignorant. But the latest one that I've heard recently is Yeshua can't be the Messiah because Messiah ben David is supposed to come and bring peace. And Yeshua specifically said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. He said that in the book of Luke. When I heard that, I literally laughed out loud. Like, are you kidding me right now? Are we, is this elementary school? Am I with children? Because yes, the Messiah ben David brings peace, but the Messiah ben Yosef literally comes to be the priest anointed for war in order to fight a battle in which, by the way, he dies so that he can be resurrected, Messiah ben David. The Messiah has to follow the pattern of Yosef. And if you look at the Jewish idea of the Messiah, right, traditionally, the one that was codified by Rambam, it never mentions Messiah ben Yosef. The Messiah is going to come and be this king who sits on the throne of David and brings in all the exiles and establishes the kingdom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to love him. We're going to amaze him. We're going to just, But that's not the reality of the first time the Messiah comes. The first time the Messiah appears, we absolutely reject him. Do you know that that's what it says in the Midrash? That the sages will reject the Messiah? No, actually it says, to be clear, we will hate him. So, the reality is that none of the Jewish ideas that I've ever read that are put out there publicly ever insinuate there's any type of what I'm talking about here. There's no type of Yosef, if you will. But the reality of Yosef is that his brothers hated him. Or as the Rebbetzin is fond of me saying, she just joined the chat. Good morning, honey. They hated his guts. They hated his guts and wanted to kill him. And in fact, kind of did kill him in a sense. And then, of course, he becomes the savior. He literally, the one, if you think about the story of Yosef, the brother that they hated, the one that they said, you will never be the boss of me, the one that they mocked and ridiculed and said, you think you're going to rule over us? You are high. Okay. They killed him and basically left him for dead, okay? And just mocked him and said, it's never going to happen. And they maintained that idea, that mindset for the entire time. In fact, the sources are going to show that up until the time that Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, up until that very moment, they still hated him. They still thought he was never going to be their king. They were just in Egypt to try to find him to kind of make their dad happy. But basically they were like, yeah. In other words, they still held to their belief of utter and absolute rejection of Joseph until the moment that they didn't, until the moment he was revealed to them. So the pattern is, based on what I just said, what messianic figure in Judaism today is frankly hated, frankly mocked, frankly the one who they say never will be the Moshiach. No way it's going to ever happen. Well, as it turns out, Joseph was that character, and he literally was the one who saved his brothers. Literally. In fact, the Midrash Rabbah refers to him as the savior of the world. So isn't that interesting? And that's why this is so exciting. And this is why the story of Joseph is crucial to understand the true Messiah, because this pattern can only be applied to Yeshua. Let me say that again. The pattern of Joseph, the Messiah ben Joseph, the suffering Messiah, can only be applied to Yeshua, cannot be applied to any other messianic figure, past or present, in Judaism. And without it, they can't be the Messiah. Without being the suffering Messiah ben Joseph, they cannot be the Messiah. Do you understand that? It's a disqualifier. In as much as you have to be of the line of David. If you're not, that's a disqualifier. Same thing with being the Messiah ben Joseph. Are we clear? Great. Good morning. Glad you're here. By the way, we're raising money for a sign. We're asking God for a sign. The digital sign is going to be magnificent. It's going to be amazing. It is $30,000 to purchase that sign because you have to actually buy two of them because it's one side and the other. That's why one of the reasons why it's so expensive. Plus, its signs are expensive, in case you didn't know. But digital ones are, and especially ones that are like outdoor digital signs. And so the good news is we have received, I think, $1,600 in-house. Actually received. Some others have been promised, but that's great. So we're on our way. But here's the thing: I'm asking you to donate to this project. And sometimes when you see a big number like 30,000, that seems really big, and it is. And you might be thinking to yourself, "Well, I can't do anything for that." But yeah, actually, you can. So there are 4 to sometimes as much as 800 viewers who watch this program every day. And then on Shabbat, we have a whole bunch. And then we have, there's 14,000 subscribers. Oh, by the way, thank you so much. We surpassed 14,000 subscribers on Shabbat. So thank you so much for everybody who has subscribed and those who are subscribing and those who will subscribe in the future. So thank you so much. That was exciting. Now we're on to 15,000. But anyway, the point being here is if everybody just gives, maybe you can give $25. Maybe you can give 50 towards the sign. Maybe you can give 200. Maybe you could give 1,000 for those of you who are blessed. That'd be great. But the point is that everybody contributes. I mean, what if 500 people contributed $50 or 25, or maybe 500 people donated $25? You can see how that adds up. So the point is, we can do this and we can do this together. And please contribute. That would be amazing. So let me say good morning, everybody, and jump into this story about the dream coat, which sounds kind of like the dreamsicle. How many of you remember dreamsicles? Do they even have those anymore? They're probably digital nowadays. It's probably like a hologram. But back in the day, we went down to the corner store and got dreamsicles. Good morning, Seth. Glad you're here. Milka, good morning. Wendeley, good morning. Kim Bement, glad to see you. Hepzibah, Boker Tov. David White, good to see you, sir. Hope you're doing well. Peaches, formerly from Georgia, glad you're here. Jubilee, good morning to you. Samuel Dykes, good morning. Seth Holt, Boker Tov to you. Amita, hope you're doing fantastic. You fell. Oh. Well, may Hashem give you a refuah shlema in the merit of Messiah Yeshua. Joe, good morning. Hope you and your fam are doing great. Pardon me. Johan, good morning. Chris and Crystal, good morning. Brenda Jones, Boker Tov. Ariella Rafaela, good morning. Hey, I have a confession to make. I did not know that Ariella Rafaela was our Ariella. Crazy. I just thought that Ariella Rafaela was, because you changed your name from your, anyway, it's not my fault. I thought Ariella Rafaela was another Ariella Rafaela, but you're not. So, hey, revelation. Good morning, Greg. Glad you're here. Donna Jones, good morning. Gianna Boker Tov. Makaya, good morning. Leah, good morning. Kristal, good morning to you, sir. Kathy, good morning to you. Who else do we have? Katura, Boker Tov. Chanel, Boker Tov. Sergio, good morning, sir. Ami, glad to see you. Who else do we have? Sarah Merritt, hope you and Shane are doing great. Michael, good morning. Kind of scanning. Heather Wilson, good morning. Hope you and Zachary are doing fantastic. Emmanuel, Boker Tov. Geneva, good morning. Look at all these precious folks. Levi, good morning. Ellie, good morning. Hope you and Joseph are doing great. Speaking of Joseph, here we are. Good morning, Z-Ray. Good morning, Shoshana. Hope you and Yaakov are doing great there in beautiful Okla Arca. Good morning, Beer to Pray. And who else am I missing? Sarah Johanna, good morning to you, ma'am. Glenn, good morning to you as well. Baruch HaShem. Hallelujah. Did I miss anybody? I'm just kind of scanning right quick. I don't like to leave people out. Good morning, Paul. Glad you're here. Baruch Hashem. All right. Praise God. Daniel Dennis, there he is. Good morning. And Denise from the United Kingdom. And Amana, good morning to you. I think I didn't miss anybody. I hope. Alita, good morning to you. Just kind of checking myself. All right. Baruch Hashem. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's dive into this story from Parashah Vayeishev, which starts out, Vayeishev Yaakov settled. We're going to start with looking at Rabbi Monk's commentary on this. The account which begins here has excited admiration, he says, throughout the generations. It is of comparable pedagogical value that is related to teaching. So the story starts out, Jacob settled in the land of his father's sojourning in the land of Canaan. These are the chronicles of Jacob, Joseph. Now, this is an interesting, we're going to get to this in a second because it says, these are the chronicles of Jacob, Joseph, which is really interesting because Jacob being a symbolism of the congregation of Israel, that name itself is sometimes referred to as the congregation of Jacob. But the chronicles, okay, of this, the Toldot, the generations, in other words, the conclusion, if you will, of this congregation, it points to Joseph. Joseph is the goal, the purpose, if you will. Joseph being a type of the Messiah. So anyway, we continue on here. It says the commentaries it's talking about. This is talking about the importance of the Joseph story. That's the theme of this paragraph. It says it deals with the most profound thoughts in a way so simple and direct that they are accessible to every child. And so this episode is of prime importance for the religious and moral education of the child. The story of Joseph is crucial in Jewish thought, and which is interesting. And there's lots of reasons for this because, it teaches, one of the things it teaches is that Joseph can go to Egypt and live as a Jew. He's the only Jew in the empire. Now, many of you out there feel you feel alone because you live, let's say, I don't know, you live in somewhere USA or somewhere in South Africa or somewhere in Canada and so on and so forth. And you don't know anybody else who believes like you do and lives like you do. And it's a challenge, and to be sure. And yet you're not alone. You can come on a program like this and interact with hundreds, even thousands of people just like you. But think about Joseph, who was in exile all by himself in Egypt, and there was no one that he could connect with. There was no one who lived like he lived. And the people who did live like he lived had utterly rejected him. Okay? So it says here, it deals with the most profound thoughts. And so this episode is of prime importance for the religious and moral education of the child. Its unique character results from the fact that it is dominated by the certainty of the omnipresent divine providence, meaning that everything that happened to Joseph was supposed to happen to Joseph. One of the things that the anti-missionaries love to say is that one way that we know that Yeshua is not the Messiah is because he was absolutely rejected by Jews, 100%. That Judaism is unanimous and it's in its decree that Yeshua is not the Messiah, and Christianity has been unsuccessful in changing their minds. But that's because Christianity, sadly, its gospel is actually false. But putting that aside, the point is that this has been the case. Well, first of all, my answer to that is that's just historically not true, meaning that there have been Jews and even Jewish leaders who did in fact believe that Yeshua is the Messiah. Granted, they were the vast minority, but still, it's not true to say that that belief is universal. Number one, putting that aside, the very fact that Yeshua is for sake of argument universally rejected is actually proof that he actually is the Messiah. It's quite the opposite, based on this story of Joseph. Because, and not just Joseph, Moses was also universally rejected. And so was David. A lot of people don't know that, but it's a fact. Joseph, Moses, and David, the three characters in the Tanakh that represent the messianic figures, those three were all absolutely rejected. I mean, rejected by their people, by the people they were trying to save. So the idea that we as Jews reject the Messiah, that's actually proof of the Messiah's messiahship, actually, if you're following the pattern. The idea that we accept it, like the Messiah is going to show up and all the Jews are going to swoon and go, oh yeah, that's him. No. Mm-mm. It's interesting because the Midrashim that deal with the Messiah actually state this as a fact, but it's taught that that's ignored. Okay. But that's why you're here. You're here to learn truth, right? So let me just repeat myself for the sake of emphasis. When you hear that the Messiah Yeshua has been rejected by, all these rabbis of today reject him, all the rabbis of yesterday rejected him, blah, 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 blah. You just go, great, awesome. That's actually proof that he is the Messiah. By the way, when I say that David was rejected, what I mean is that the Sanhedrin under the Nasi Doeg, who was at the time the greatest Torah scholar alive, they ruled that he wasn't even a Jew. much less eligible to be king. Did you nod your head if you just heard what I said? Nod your head. Everybody who's not nodding. Okay, nod your head. Thank you. So when you hear people say, halakhically, we've ruled, the Yeshua is not the Moshiach, just go, awesome, because David was. That was pretty cool what just happened on Facebook. Did y'all see? Are y'all on Facebook? Did y'all see that? I just did the double thumbs up and fireworks went off around my head. Did y'all? Brenda Hagen's on Facebook, and so is Erica and Katura. Glad you guys are there. Did y'all see that? That was pretty wild. I wish it would do that on YouTube. I did the double thumbs up and these on the screen here on Facebook, fireworks went off and stuff behind me. That's crazy. Anyway, point being, is everybody understand the point here? The rejection of the Messiah by Jews is actually crucial and fundamental to his messiahship. Does everybody understand? This is really, 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 really important. And this is why, if you believe in the Messiah and you've walked this walk, you can't go out there and go, well, I'm going to reject him now because I was watching Rabbi so-and-so, who, by the way, golly, how do I talk about this? Some of you are watching popular rabbis out there that have a large following that you don't know because you don't know that no other Orthodox rabbi accepts them. No other Orthodox institution validates their ministry. Oh, they're Orthodox, all right, and they don't believe in Yeshua, but when they come to town, no Orthodox synagogue will host them. They have to speak in other places. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a brick sometimes with some of this stuff. But you just don't be out there playing, just picking up guns and pulling the trigger. You've got to, I don't know. I'm just going to stop talking. Well, let's go on. It says the guiding principle of this episode applies first and foremost to Genesis, but it is also valid for biblical history as a whole. It is that the divine message and great lessons of duty are taught to man not by means of abstract formula, but with the help of living examples of human beings who, like ourselves, feel and give in and sin, and yet even when they do stray, they remain aware of the unique path of truth and rise up again. The attitude of Joseph's brothers when they realize the enormity of their crime gives us an example of this. So it's interesting because this episode teaches us something really, really interesting. Let's approach this from the traditional Christian point of view. The traditional Christian point of view has been historically that the Jews rejected their true Messiah, and as a result, the Jews themselves were rejected and replaced with another people group, and that people group has become the true Israel, and Jews are, rejected, right? That has been the line that was taught by the letter writer, who was, in fact, a false apostle. And that's what's been propagated. And that is a core tenet of Christianity today. Now, naturally, there are groups of Christians and there are denominations of Christians who reject that mindset. Nevertheless, that is, in fact, the core principle of Christianity, has been for nearly 2,000 years. That the Jews are rejected and a new people were raised up, and those people became the true Israel. Okay, that is, of course, a false doctrine and completely contrary to scores of verses that one may find in the Tanakh. It is not biblical in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Now, we go back to the biblical idea. Why is it not biblical? Well, first of all, it's not biblical because the Bible is teaching us that we as Jews have to reject our Messiah. That's actually validation that he's Messiah, as I just waxed eloquently for a few minutes a while ago. But here it's also teaching us something else important, that we as human beings can make a colossal mistake that actually is the will of God for our life because it's going to lead us somewhere important. In other words, this is an example of God's amazing grace. Not that he causes us to sin, not that he wants us to sin, but in his great omnipotence, in his unfathomable ability to see the end from its beginning, a lot of the colossal mistakes that we have made in life are actually all part of the divine plan. And here, the brothers realized that on the one hand, it was a big sin for them to reject their brother. And yet, at the same time, had they not committed that sin, then the whole world would not have come to know the true Messiah. And so, in effect, their sin, once they realized who he really was and repented of that sin, became the greatest mitzvah. It was a great favor. It's like sometimes, people say, well, you Jews crucified the Messiah. Well, our response to that is, you're welcome. Because had we not done so, and we didn't really crucify him, actually it was the Romans, but let's put technicalities aside. Had we not done that, then you, Mr. and Mrs. Non-Jew, would not know about the real Messiah and would not be here today learning about who he really was and what he really taught. The reality is, had we not rejected the Messiah, then 99% of the Christians out there today would be in some form of idolatry, some other religious cult, most likely. Okay? So now we can take this home to our own personal life. And you can think about your big colossal mistake. All of us have at least one. Sometimes we have one or two or 10, but we all have at least one colossal mistake, and you beat yourself up over it, which, may not be necessarily bad, because we do need to remind ourselves of things that we did that were wrong. But you beat yourself up over it, and in reality, had you not made that colossal mistake that was totally wrong, then you would not be where God needed you to be today. And that's a reality. And that's the paradox of sin. The paradox of sin is that it is bad and it is wrong, and we need to avoid it like the plague. And at the same time, very often those sins get us to where we need to be. That's the reality. Okay? It's kind of like, if I can use the analogy, it's kind of like cleaning your house. How many of you, don't raise your hand, don't raise your hand, don't raise your hand. But how many of you, your house doesn't get really, really clean until you got surprise company coming over? I'm not saying you live in a dirty house, because we're all human beings, and our homes, we live there. So, dishes get left on the counter, and, your wife's clothes get spread out all over the place. I'm just teasing women, but you know what I mean. But seriously, how many of you, like when you got surprise company on their way, boy, that house gets clean, like boom. Anyway, it's kind of a silly example, but it's true, isn't it? Hey, I'm going to do the thumbs up thing on YouTube again, or on Facebook, and see if it happens for those of you who are watching. So if I do like this, look at that. It did it again. Do y'all see that, or is it just me on Facebook? Let me know if you see that too. That was pretty cool. I'm sorry. I'm playing with my Facebook video thing now. All right, so let's go on to the Chronicles of Joseph part, and then we're working our way to the Coke part. But this is all part of the story. It says Ele Todot Yaakov Yosef. Okay, these are the Chronicles of Jacob, Joseph. The Midrash explains that the Torah wanted to make the history of Jacob depend. Listen to this. Listen to this. The Midrash explains that the Torah wanted to make the history of Jacob depend on that of Joseph for many reasons. Indeed, the whole history of Jacob's descendants is reflected in Joseph's life. The favorite son of the patriarch in the prime of his youth was compelled to flee from the home of his parents and the land of his birth. He was abandoned in a foreign land among a debauched people, and they did all they could so that even his name would be forgotten. Are you hearing the words that are coming out of my mouth? They wanted Joseph gone so much that they even wanted to erase his name. This is why anti-missionaries today refuse to refer to the Messiah as Yeshua. You will notice that every anti-missionary or Jewish rabbi or whatever who teaches against the Messiah, they will only call him Jesus. They know his name is Yeshua. They know his name is not Jesus, but they will not call him Yeshua. They will only refer to him as Jesus. Why? Because they want to erase even his name. Because see, if he's Yeshua, then they're going to have to reconcile with his Jewishness and the Jewishness of his message. See, Jesus is easy to defeat because the caricature of Jesus is all Greek and Roman and antithetical and foreign to the Bible. But the point here is they want to erase his name. This is why, as believers, it's important to use the name Yeshua, and it is not the same as Jesus. And don't ever say to anybody, please hear me, do not ever say to anybody, I believe in Yeshua, Jesus. Don't ever say that because they're not the same. Okay? I have a whole teaching on this called Jesus versus Yeshua. They're not the same. It's not interchangeable names. And it's not just about a name. I mean, the name part is one aspect, the history of it. The name Jesus has literally only existed since 1632. Like, that's a literal fact. Okay? But it's beyond that. Shakespeare said a rose by any other name is still a rose. Well, that's true as long as it's a rose. Okay? But you can't call a tulip a rose. So you can't say a rose, a tulip, it's the same thing. No, they're not. Now, if you called a rose a tulip and it was literally a rose, well, that's one thing. The fact of the matter is that Jesus is the character of Jesus is not the same as Yeshua. So please don't ever say that. And it's important as people who believe in the Messiah to actually call him by his name. You know, the one who the angel said, you shall call him Yeshua. It wasn't like, if you think it's a good idea, this might be a name we would suggest. He said, you shall call his name Yeshua. And as a believer, I want to encourage you to, even if you're a Christian, you're just watching me because you're here to learn and explore, only use the name of Yeshua. Because you have to understand that the enemies of the Messiah will never call him by his real name. Let me say that again. The enemies of the Messiah, those who hate him and those who don't want to believe him, will never call him by his actual name. Let me say that again, Charlie. The enemies of the Messiah will never call him by his real name, Yeshua. So why, you who love him, why are you calling him by the name they call him by? Why do we want to do that? Okay. So it says they even tried to destroy his name, to erase his name. Okay. But what happened to him? All the trials and tribulations of his destiny were turned into a springboard for his prodigious ascent. He became a benefactor who gave food to people. And by the way, isn't it interesting? So one of the things that Joseph is known for is providing bread to the whole world. And isn't it interesting that one of the things, think of all the miracles that Yeshua performed while he was here. I mean, we get a few of them in the Gospels, but there were miracles all the time. But two of the miracles that are talked about is providing bread for people. You see why? So why is that miracle included in the Gospels? And the answer is, I think, because it points back to the Messiah ben Yosef, who gave bread to people. Marie says he gave his Hebrew name in our end time. Marie, that's actually a great thought, because the fact that this revelation of the Yeshua versus Jesus is happening now is in fact an indication of the end times, because what it tells me is that the true Messiah is beginning to be revealed. Okay. And it's a great thought. It's a great thought. So it says, and ultimately it came to pass rather, that his brothers who had sworn to do away with him, listen to this statement. Let me start over. Golly, this is so good. This is from Rabbi Monk's commentary talking about Yosef. This is why I say Yeshua is the divine Messiah, because only he fits this pattern. Okay? You have lots of messianic figures from history. You have some today who people think are the Messiah. And there are people who believe in them and people who don't believe in them, but nobody hates them. Nobody has utterly rejected them. Nobody has suggested that they're not Jewish, or that they're practitioners of the occult, or they're witchcraft, or they lead people astray. They may not believe in them, but they don't hate them. You understand the difference? But that's not true of Messiah Yeshua. The people who reject, the Jews who reject Yeshua, hate him. And that's actually part of the proof that he's the Messiah. You go out there to Jewish websites and you're like, well, golly gee, Moses, every Jew rejects Yeshua. Yeah, that's just like they did Joseph, just like they did Moses, just like they did David, until they didn't. Everybody rejected David until they didn't. Everybody rejected Moses until they didn't. Everybody rejected Joseph until they didn't. But listen to this sentence. Listen to the sentence. And it ultimately came to pass that his brothers, who had sworn to do away with him, came to kneel before him. So these anti-missionary groups that are out there, these Jewish groups, that their mission is to destroy belief in Yeshua, bring it. Because that's all part of the pattern. By the way, what channel can I find the anti-missionary works that prove that Rebbe Schneerson is not the Messiah? On what channel on YouTube or Facebook can I find the anti-missionary group they're dedicated to proving that Nachman is not the Messiah? Who's got that link? There's a whole lot of Jews a lot of Jews who believe in the Rebbe as the Messiah. There's a lot of Jews who believe that Nachman is the Messiah. There was that guy who was had 15 minutes of fame in Jerusalem last year or year before that everybody was saying he's the Messiah. He had like this big entourage. Where was the website or the anti-missionary group that was dedicated to proving that he was a false Messiah? Where is that one? You see, the only one that has a dedicated movement to destroy him is Yeshua, just like Joseph had. They hated Joseph so bad, they wanted to get rid of his name. Why did they hate him? Well, it brings us back to the coat. The coat, by the way, is the coat of Adam. That's the coat that was given to Joseph. They hated Joseph because of the coat. But really, it was deeper than that. The real reason they hated Joseph was because that he was the favored son. Now we could wax eloquently about how this is really a bad idea by Jacob to have a favorite son. And that's true. We could also talk about Joseph because Joseph is a type of the Messiah, but he's not the Messiah. So he's not perfect. He's a human being. And that's why human beings can't save you because they're not perfect. There's that. That should be, that should be such a, what I just said there is so, common sense, but anyway. But Joseph, he had some issue. He had some vanity issues. He had some pride issues. Him being selected as the favorite son and being given the coat of Adam to a 17-year-old boy, that went to his head naturally. So can you imagine your dad gives you the coat of Adam? You can imagine how that would go to you. So he had some flaws, but the real hatred of him came from jealousy, which is the reason why the brothers hated the reason they hated Joseph is because they were jealous, and they hated Yeshua because of jealousy. The Gospels bring down it was ultimately about jealousy. They didn't like the fact that everybody was going after them. Everybody was subscribing to Yeshua's YouTube channel and not theirs. A lot of times this is jealousy. But let me read this inside here. We've got a lot to talk about with respect to Joseph. We're just, it's gonna take a minute to get through it because there's just so much. But let me just conclude with this last statement about the coat and their fear. Okay. So it says, according to one opinion, the coat was the cloak that Jacob received when Esau sold him the birthright. This cloak originally belonged to Adam. It would fit only a firstborn son, since the birthright had been taken away from Reuben because of his sin that he committed, as outlined in Vayeishev. The cloak was given to Joseph. Okay. And of course, Joseph had these dreams, which the coat is really the anointing that came from God, of course, and the coat is kind of what opened up the dreamer's mind. But then it says this: all the brothers hated Joseph, hated him. Leah's sons were jealous of him because he was Jacob's favorite. The sons of Bilhah and Zilpah had no cause to complain about favoritism because they had to expect inferior status, but they were jealous of his beautiful new coat. His dreams also disturbed them, and the bad reports affected them all. So they hated his coat, they hated his favoritism, they hated his dreams, and they hated the fact that Joseph, apparently one of his flaws was he was a tattletale. They hated him for that. Okay? It says, besides, this is Mamlo's insights, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. Besides, the brothers were afraid that Jacob would disinherit them as Abraham had done to Ishmael and Isaac, and as Isaac had done to Esau. So they were concerned about replacement theology. So it says, when the brothers saw that Joseph was slandering them to their father and that Jacob was showing favoritism to Joseph, they were concerned that Jacob would disinherit them and consider Joseph his only son. The Torah therefore says his brothers saw their father loved him more than all of his brothers. They were afraid that because of Joseph, they would no longer be considered Jacob's children and he would no longer be considered their father. This is exactly what Christianity did when it allowed itself to create a false gospel based on the teachings of one man. It's exactly what happened. The false Messiah created a new people group. You see what I'm saying? But see, here's the reality. The true Messiah will not do that. It says the brothers tried to speak to Joseph and iron out their differences, but they try as they would, the opportunity never arose. The Torah thus says they could not speak to him peacefully. That is, they would not speak to him. They tried to make up, but they were not able to do so. The fact of the matter is they rejected him out of jealousy and hatred, and they wanted to get rid of him so bad they wanted to even erase his name. End of our Aliyah today. We have a lot more to share. We're just simply out of time. We are never out of content. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue this discussion about Jacob and Joseph and the similarities there and other insights related to that. So thank you for being here. Please be sure and donate to our sign campaign. We're asking God for a sign. And also subscribe to this channel. We're on our way to 15,000. So thank you so much for doing that. Like this video, share it with all of your friends, and I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great and amazing day.